For something to begin, many times another thing must end. Living with gaming franchises for years and years allows us to become closely attached to our favorite worlds and characters. But when developers have run out of effective ways to keep the story going, it's time to move on. We wouldn't want some of these entities to die if we didn't care about them so much. That's how far we feel these 10 legacies have gone astray. It's time to turn them to ash so that one day they may rise again like a mighty phoenix. Or not. The HYPERDIMENSION NEPTUNIA series has a novel premise: personify video game consoles and have them fight in a literal console war. The problem is that NEPTUNIA never capitalizes on the full potential of its ideas. Instead, it amounts to little more than incessant fan service, undercooked combat, and egregious repetition. Wearing out its welcome in the first installment, it's astounding that HYPERDIMENSION NEPTUNIA is already 9 games deep, including spin-offs and remakes. We're amazed there's enough interest to continually support something so shallow. The long-running Tales series has had some great games in its history. Games like Tales of Symphonia and Tales of Vesperia are beloved by many JRPG fans. However, the more recent titles haven't really done much to move the franchise forward. Tales of Grace's F featured one of the dullest casts we've played in recent memory. Tales of Exilia's story was so boring and cliché, many of us couldn't finish it, and subsequently didn't bother with Exilia 2. Tales of Zestiria looks to be the same game we've been playing for years. The series can do better, and it's frustrating to see it settle for average. It had a good run, but it's time to end the tale. Once upon a time, the name Fable meant something. Its initial concept of a hero discovering his or her world through a series of life-altering decisions has been put aside to experiment with motion controls, party games, and asymmetrical multiplayer. These days, Fable's storybook art style is one of the only things that ties the new releases to the original games, once you take the title away. Fable is a charming franchise, but if the games can't move the series forward instead of just barely keeping it alive, they should be considered the ending chapters of this book. It may be an evil choice to make, but it's done with good intentions. Originally meant to be a satire of American culture and overconsumption, the Sims series has crossed the fine line of becoming a parody unto itself. Now an overbloated cash cow of expansions, spin-offs, watered-down console schlock, and cringe-inducing Facebook flash games, The Sims is the same gluttonous enterprise it once purported to loathe. The Sims 4, the last main installment, felt incomplete at launch, and perhaps intentionally, to ensure that users would drop coin on the game's many expansions. Regardless, we're not buying it. It's time to let the Grim Reaper claim its prize and put The Sims to rest. Some souls still burn for this monumental series, but the fire is not as bright as it once was. At the launch of the Dreamcast, SOULCALIBUR was cutting edge, a new approach to 3D fighters that obliterated everything else available. We also strongly appreciate SOULCALIBUR 2 with its numerous tweaks, character additions, and conquest, an asynchronous mode that evolved around your playstyle, although it was exclusive to the arcades. The sequel and spin-offs since have been a little disappointing. None of them feel like a true evolution. One of the big additions in SOULCALIBUR 5 is the ability to fill up a meter and unleash special attacks, something that's been in countless other fighting games over the years. It seems as though SOULCALIBUR is content with towing the line instead of pushing forward. Hold the phone, what's Metal Gear Solid, one of the greatest franchises of all time, doing on this list? Let us explain. This isn't a matter of poor quality or a dearth of new ideas. This has everything to do with series creator Hideo Kojima's sudden and secretive firing. Konami has promised to keep publishing new Metal Gear games, and that's fine, Rising is great. We just specifically never want to see one end with the word solid. Kojima's gone, that story is over. The world will not need another Metal Gear Solid game. Snake had a hard life. He needs some time off. Saints Row the Third felt like it came out of nowhere. There are things worth admiring in Saints Row 2, but the sequel is where the series really got its voice. Total irreverence only works in games when there's a solid foundation to support it. It's hilarious that you can blow up zombies with Burt Reynolds and launch people out of a cannon, but it's even better that this stuff actually feels good too. You can have too much of a good thing, however. While we enjoy Saints Row 4, its flavor of ridiculousness doesn't have the same effect on us, probably because it's so similar to its predecessor. Also, superpowers makes a lot of other things, like cars, completely redundant, and we often feel so powerful that things get boring. Unless the next game can go beyond adding additional insanity, we're okay with the 3rd Street Saints taking a very long break. With its arresting debut trailer, Dead Island gained attention and became a massive hit for Deep Silver. The game didn't set the world on fire, but the publisher jumped on the brand as if they'd invented zombies. They rushed out an uninspired sequel of sorts with Dead Island Riptide, and then creative differences led the original developers at Techland to part ways and start anew with Dying Light. Meanwhile, Deep Silver followed up with the loosely related technical nightmare of Escape Dead Island and announced 2 more sequels, Dead Island 2, which is now without a developer, and Dead Island Epidemic, a MOBA which looks in danger of falling apart before it reaches version 1.0. Dead Island had its day in the sun. Someone is going to have to bash in the head of its shambling corpse. We bet you could see this one coming, but seriously, we mean this. Sonic can die. We don't need to hear about how Sonic Generations and Sonic Colors are actually pretty good. These are delusions. The Sonic the Hedgehog brand has inexplicably persisted for over 2 decades after its last great game. Keep in mind, Sega once officially pulled all Sonic games with an average or below average Metacritic score from store shelves, and then 4 years later, still had the nerve to release something like Sonic Boom. We just don't want to see our old chili dog loving buddy humiliated like this anymore. In 5 short years since Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, a series with genuine potential has become a hamster wheel for multiple teams of talented developers to run in place, drudging out hollow open worlds every calendar year. With any comprehensible storyline long since abandoned, all that remains are games that barely manage to make even the most casual gamer feel like an expert killer. And don't forget the piles of insignificant side games and expanded content, so dense that few could hope to untangle the web of directionless lore. Without a solid compass to guide it, each iteration of Assassin's Creed feels more empty than the last, set on a crash course to disappointment for the brave souls who still manage to cling to the optimism that maybe this one can turn it around. Our team takes a trip to suburban hell in a special fiasco edition of Tabletop Adventures, and Ian Hink helps you get the most out of the new expansion to the Talos Principle and a passionate analysis of the road to Gehenna. We'll see you next Sunday for another GT Countdown.